to introducing our reader, my reader. I want to say how thankful I am to have been blessed with 5 fine writers. This is my first semester back after 9 years away. I was gone for 9 years, and the luck of the draw, I ended up finding 5 really good writers. And you know who you are. And 3 of them I'm introducing while we're up here. The first one is Sophfronia Scott. What I most appreciate, there's a million things I can say about Sophfronia. PHF, Sophfronia. What I most appreciate about Sophfronia Scott is her diligence. I don't mean by using this word that she is simply industrious or dogged. What I mean is that she pays careful and persistent attention to her writing on all fronts. She loves her characters, whether fictive or not, and shows that love by being careful to let them bloom all on their own, to speak and act and ponder and live the way they choose for better and for worse, instead of exerting her will over them all. That is, she is certainly persistent, she is diligent, to give them life and then let them live it. I've had the honor to work with her toward finishing a novel I believe will see print in the not-too-distant future. I've seen it in its most vaunted state, as for example this entry from early on in the book. For Val, the best part was when it was his turn to grip the stick in his hands and feel the sting in his palms when he thwacked the ball out into the street. It burned like hell, but he could sing with the pain because it just felt right to be making use of his body. Didn't his mama understand that? Didn't she know all the time she was scolding him for not being able to sit still when he was supposed to be practicing scales on the piano? That he was just trying to give in to his body's power. And I've seen it in its most elementary, and I'm talking elementary here. As with this entire chapter, coming about 2/3 of the way through the book, chapter 20, and this is all in all caps. Add chapter on Cecily and her desire awakened for wanting to go back to Val, but guilt over betraying Sam. Turn the page, next chapter, chapter 21. To which I responded, yes, this is a good idea. But what I've seen throughout is a writer that is an artist, working, playing at her craft, diligent to find the best and most beautiful path forward toward what will be, I am certain, a very fine book. Sophfronia Scott.
Thank you, Bret. I would like to thank all of my advisors, Clint McHown, Ellen Lesser, Larry Sutton, Patrick Madden, Bret Lott. I am a dual genre student, and that means I've gone on a journey that I didn't expect to take. And because I didn't expect to do nonfiction. And my reading today is going to give you a taste of that journey. I'm going to read a little bit from the novel. I'm going to read an essay for you. And then I'm going to end with a prose poem, which was totally unexpected for me. For the novel, this is an African-American version of Dangerous Liaisons. It takes place in Harlem in 1947. And all you need to know for this part is that Val has seduced a woman, actually fallen in love with her, and then was shamed into dumping her. And some of you have heard me read the part where she comes to a tragic end. So that's part of the Dangerous Liaison story, you know that she does. This piece I'm going to read for you now is his point of view of what has happened. Val sat at the bar at his club, drinking his fill of bourbon. It had become his habit of the last several nights to exist unfed, unshaven, and unwell until the bar closed. Then he would go to Elizabeth's apartment building and stand across the street. He stared up at her windows until well past noon, when his legs threatened to unravel with exhaustion, and Sebastian arrived to drive him home for a few hours of miserable sleep. He'd stopped trying to call when she took the phone off the hook. He could only hope to see her, to speak to her in person, but her doorman had become resolute and wouldn't let Val pass the threshold. He had to wait for her to come out, and so far she had not. When Gladys Vaughn showed up in all her lumpy-bodied glory, she went in and stayed, and for once Val was actually grateful for her. He knew Gladys would care for Elizabeth, make her eat, and bring her out to the world again. He missed Elizabeth like he would miss the sun. He'd wandered in darkness ever since he left her, but for the most part he found the darkness comforting because it hid from him the have a soul because of the way he went through the world, unable to feel anything or anyone really mattered to him. Always, though, there had been the glimmer of hope he glimpsed in the early morning sun. Elizabeth had fulfilled the promise of that hope. He couldn't bear knowing how he'd waited for this precious hope for so long, only to throw it away when she finally arrived. When he sat on the bar stool, and when he stood on the street, he played back in his mind each and every time he had made love to Elizabeth. He cataloged the different smells of her skin, the placement of the freckles and moles that looked like chocolate dots on her body. In the summer, at Aunt Rose's, Elizabeth had smelled like the sun, warm and familiar, when her skin seemed most like his own. Then, as autumn came on, she smelled of cinnamon and cocoa butter, the scents she smoothed over her skin to keep it soft and supple as the air grew dry. But it was only when he was back in bed, exhausted and on the verge of passing out, that Val allowed himself to remember exactly what it was like to be inside her. She was wet and blossoming, folding and unfolding as he pushed into her deeper, but there was always a point where he couldn't tell if he had stopped, because she seemed to be pulling him in more, and he couldn't resist. Val would fall asleep with these memories, and in the morning, in the dregs of half-sleep, he would grow hard and rub himself into the sheets, trying to make the last notes of his dreaming of her as real as possible before he fully woke up to nothingness. When Elizabeth appeared at the window that morning, Val thought he could be the happiest man on earth. It was the first time he had seen her in so long. He wanted to call out to her, but he only stared. Her hair hung down around her shoulders, and the long white nightgown she wore made her look perfectly ethereal, an angel, a fairy. She was so beautiful. Then he realized his lips were moving, and he was talking to her and to himself. Elizabeth, 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 he whispered over and over. He savored the sound of her name. By seeing Elizabeth and saying Elizabeth, he tasted her again and remembered her laughter, light and airy. He smiled for the first time in days and raised his arms up toward the window. Though his arms ached to hold her again, all Val really wanted to tell her he just wanted to tell her all the terrible things he'd done, of all the lies he told her, and how, when he once called her his other self, that had been the one true thing he ever said. How else could he have treated her the way he did? He knew so well how to attack her because he knew so keenly how to hurt himself. And he discarded her heartlessly because that's what he thought of himself. If only he could have fully believed in what she said about him, how she said she saw him. But then Val saw his error. Elizabeth was indeed part of him. So he realized all he ever had to do was have faith in the part of him that was her. That part would know how to fight as she did. That part would know how to see as she saw the world. And that part of him would certainly know how to love. Now he burned to tell her of this discovery. He thought if he could just tell her, and not even "I love you," she would understand everything. When she opened the window, Val thought he would have his chance. He stepped forward and was about to call up to her when Elizabeth climbed onto the windowsill. Her toes grasped for the ledge, toes like those of a baby standing for the first time and trying to understand the strangeness beneath its feet. Her arms flew up, just as they had done whenever she wanted to embrace him. Good God, no. She did it easily, bravely. He found himself marveling once more over her glorious strength. She did it like she knew for certain she could fly, and because she was certain, he was certain too. He fully expected her to catch a current of the morning air in the folds of her nightgown and come floating down to him like she did in his dreams. She would look at him with pity and forgiveness and love. He would weep at her feet. He moved toward her so she wouldn't have to fly so far. A truck nearly hit him when he rushed across the street. He heard its brakes squeal, but he didn't care. To him, everything needed to break. Everyone everyone needed to stop because there was his angel. Someone shouted, and Elizabeth took flight. A hollow croak resonated in Val's chest, and he realized the cry was his own. No, Elizabeth, no. She seemed to slow on her descent, and he remembered the lightness of her body, how small and dear she felt next to him. He remembered walking on the lawn with her in Westchester, and he remembered how she had warned him about caring too much about what others think. He had told her she was right, and not because it was something he thought she wanted to hear. He said it because it was true. But he didn't listen to her. And now, because of his pride, caprice, and arrogance, Elizabeth, his angel, fell to earth. Val didn't hear the screams around him. He didn't hear the car horns, or when they eventually came, the sirens. He dropped to his knees and lifted her to him. Her head lolled to the right and fell against his chest. He held it there. He kissed her head, rocked her, and kissed her again. His arms ached with the pain of finally being able to hold her at last. Now I'm going to read an essay for you. This is called White Shirts, and this piece, I'm proud to say, was published in Douglas Glover's wonderful literary journal, Humorous. When my friend Jenny answered her cell phone that day, she said, "I'm walking with Jake and Ella and Grandma in Central Park. We're only a few blocks away. Come join us." Jake was Jenny's preschool-age son. Ella was her dog. And Grandma? Well, Grandma was Lena Horne, singer, actress, icon. I said okay, hung up the phone, and kept walking, but I was pretty sure I'd left part of my brain back on the corner of East 68th and Fifth Avenue. At that point, Jenny and I had been friends, dear friends, for close to 2 years, but I'd never met the legendary Lena. Her public appearances, even at family functions, were few. Our mutual friends spoke of her with hushed awe, wondering if they would ever get the opportunity being presented to me then. They talked about the possibilities of being tongue-tied, not knowing what to say, of coming off as being less than fully charged in the mental department. As I walked toward the park, I took on all of their anxieties, just assuming they were my own. I felt like the suede jacket I wore suddenly looked shabby, and the scuff marks on my boots were rising up, all white and too obvious. I found them, stroller, dog, and women, taking up most of the footpath near the East 70s. Jenny introduced me, and when Lena said my name, Frony, as I'm known in their family, the fear inside me melted. I recognized the lilt of her voice, but not from her recordings or from her movies. She sounded like someone I loved. I heard the tones of my father's sisters during my childhood, slow and elegant and beautiful. I don't remember what she wore, unusual for me because at the time I was mad for fashion, but I remember the glow of her skin, the way her chin tilted up to examine my face. Maybe she marveled over my freckles or the reddish-brown shade of my dreadlocks. From the intensity of her gaze, though, I gathered that she was searching not for prettiness, but for content. She wanted, I think, to see what was in my brown eyes. I remember bearing her weight as she took my arm, and we walked while Jenny pushed Jake in the stroller and supervised the leashed but ever-roaming Ella. I like to believe she spoke to me as she did then because she had soon realized I was not like her granddaughter's other friends, urban and modern and lovely, but for her out of reach in terms of connections and references. Lena was born in 1917. My father, by then deceased, had come into the world in 1919, so I had grown up with her language, with her references. Talking to her was not that different from talking to my own father in our living room as he sat in his recliner. In fact, Lena asked me about my people, and I told her about my father coming from Mississippi and my mother's family from Tennessee, and how they merged in Ohio, but raised me and my siblings as though no one had ever left either of those southern spaces, right down to my father's whippings and demeaning words, which stung even more than the physical strikes. My sisters and I were taught to cook and clean and iron as if if they were the only endeavors that could ensure our survival as women. By the time I was 18 and leaving for college, I was so angry, I vowed never to return. I didn't tell Nina that part. That's how the ironing talk started. She seemed intrigued that I had learned so young and surprised that I still did it. My husband was and is terrible with an iron, and it never occurred to me to send the shirts out to be laundered and pressed, as most men in New York City, even those who couldn't afford it, probably did. Lena, I learned, had married young, just 19, to a man who, much like my father, insisted on his wife producing ironed shirts, fresh biscuits, and perfect needlework, but she had been taught none of it. It had been important to her to try. I could see that as a little frown creased Lena's brow. Her own father had been absent most of her childhood, and she seemed to have wanted the chance to show this kind of diligence for a man she loved. For a moment, Lena released my arm, and her pale hands at waist level swept through the air in front of her. I used to weep over that man's shirts, she said. I nodded, and we stood there together at an imaginary ironing board. The yellow leaves over our heads and under our feet provided the light for our work on that overcast day. And they were all white shirts, right? I asked. I remembered my father's own white shirts as I heard Lena answer, yes. We stood there, the shirt large and voluminous in Lena's small hands, the white cotton hopelessly scorched. Lena had squeezed my heart, and I wanted to cry, because I could feel how much she had loved her husband, how much she must have tried. I knew what it was to have such proof of obvious failure. I, too, had burned my father's shirt, and coffee, and biscuits, and collard greens. But I had been able to make adjustments, so many adjustments, until I had eventually mastered most domestic tasks and could present my father with perfect shirts and perfect biscuits. It never occurred to me what it would have been like never to be able to do it, to never be able to show love in this way. Of course, I wouldn't have said that when I was ironing my father's shirts, but I remembered the complete sense of pleasure and satisfaction when my father pulled on a shirt without making a critical remark. Maybe I even felt proud of the way he had looked. I wanted to tell Lena right then how to iron that shirt. Years later, it still seemed to matter, and I felt Lena would have listened, that she still wanted to know, like it was the answer to an essential but long elusive riddle. To this day, I have never read any proper instruction for how to iron a shirt. I suppose if I Googled how to iron a shirt, I would find enough information with video included to bring me to the level of the ironing elite. But I feel what I learned from my mother's hands is old magic. I don't want to meddle with it. I can tell you I start with the collar, unbuttoning it if it's that kind, and laying it as flat as I can on the ironing board. I press it end to end. Ironing the small parts of a shirt is when you're most likely to get burned. You have to hold the part close to the iron while you press, and your fingers are simply in harm's way. A burn rises quickly, a living red capsule on the surface of your skin. You think it will never heal, but that's how much it hurts when it happens. Ice is better than butter, I'll tell you that right now. Butter and burns is an old wives' tale. Working with steam is a blessing. I didn't have a steam iron when I was a kid, and my arms often ached with the effort of exerting the right pressure to smooth out the fabric. When I got older, my father bought us a Press-O-Matic, a smaller version of the huge rectangular ironing machines you see at the dry cleaners. But that's another story and a different set of burns. Next, I pick up the shirt and lay it on one side of the front with the buttons face down and running horizontally in front of me. I iron that, then the sleeve on that same side. Sleeves are tricky because of their roundness. They don't lie flat well, so I will usually iron a sleeve and turn it over to find the funky crease I didn't mean to create, running like a new slash down the arm. Once I fix that, I move to the other side and the other sleeve. Then I lay the back of the shirt out with the neck area fitted as much as possible over the narrow end of the ironing board. I press the back and all the little nooks of the back of the neck. I run the nose of the iron around inside the cuffs and then I'm done. It takes a lot of love, to iron a shirt he will never wear. When I see a man wearing a meticulous shirt, I wonder who loves him, who has taken the trouble. Or did he have to send the shirt out because no one does? Thinking about my father now, I tend to focus more on the love and less on the anger. In many ways, I have forgiven him. Such forgiveness is possible, I believe, not because he is long dead, but because of these unexpected moments of grace reaching across generations, reminding me of this. The reason I hurt so much then was because I cared so much then. I still care. As I look back on that autumn afternoon and how Lena took my arm again as we continued our stroll through Central Park, I can see how in that moment I was in my 30s, Lena was in her 80s, but we were both girls ironing the shirts of the first men we ever cared for, hoping they could feel our love pressed hard into every crease. Like 2 minutes. I have a prose poem. It's really short to read for you. And you'll learn more about this because it's a form that we heard about yesterday in a lecture, but I didn't write this yesterday. This is called Honoring Autumn. It's a dervish essay. I learned about dervish essays a year ago when I first heard Robert Vivian do one, and it was like hearing about a toy. I was like, oh God, I want to do that. I want to do that. So this is called Honoring Autumn because it's an answer to a question. Someone asked me, how do you honor autumn? Honoring autumn, I turn my face to accept its first golden kiss, one silent plea for attention. So honoring autumn, I sit on a rock in the forest, patient audience to each leaf tumbling, honoring autumn with my presence, which autumn returns to me with the word moment, wrapped in twigs and wild grapevines that fall through my hands, so the word disappears at once as I sense it, and I offer my full gaze, honoring autumn, because no one wants to die alone, not even the sugar maple leaves that burn bright red just to make me look. And I do, and see these leaves aflame and dying as tiny phoenixes again and again, and in their smoke I smell cinnamon, and in their smoke I smell nutmeg, and I receive the promise of their ashes, which I need, since in honoring autumn, I am listening to the bell tolls of my own death gently approaching, and I will not miss it, as I would if I didn't think to cherish the leaves before a rainstorm, knowing many will be loosed before their time, and honoring autumn, I am hospice, preparing flowers for their winter demise, and I am hope, slipping bulbs like living secrets into the earth, and honoring autumn, I remember the seed that sprouted my son, planted in me in autumn, and how he blooms in everyday spring, reminding me of resurrection, even as I am honoring autumn, which I must do because death still must come first. And I lower my aging body into hot baths, so I will not resent the coming cold already creeping over the floorboards. And honoring autumn, I emerge from this liquid, glowing and warm, a newborn Venus, baptized and eager to embrace harvest moon, hanging full and heavy like a sleepy baby drawn from his mother's breast. And honoring autumn because autumn is orange like my hair, and yellow like my skin, and brown like my eyes, and teaching me how the beauty of all three will soon fall away. But autumn whispering hope, and autumn whispering love, and I am listening, autumn, and I am once more Red Riding Hood with my basket of light and smiles, traipsing through the tangled neverwood of a beloved friend's dream, to deliver autumn's message that we are eternal despite the falling all around us. And honoring autumn, he awakens and remembers he already heard this in a river carrying the autumn leaves away to their watery decay. And I awaken to those autumn leaves, glowing yellow outside my window, and autumn calling me to come, for I nearly slept through the moment of their letting go. And I rise, so I can learn to do the same, releasing ego and essence evermore into deep, deep blue autumn skies. And what is left of me falls into the softness of the loam, returning to the first bed of my being to await the precious breath of the divine, drawing me into life